Ambassador Ashraf, ladies and gentlemen, as a co-chairman of the Global Diwan with Intisar al-Sabah of Kuwait, and on her behalf, I would like to greet everyone, every participant who are with us for this webinar, which will be dedicated to doing business with India, a Euro-Arab perspective. And first of all, I would like to greet and thank His Excellency Ambassador Javid Ashraf, the Indian ambassador to France, who has accepted to be with us and will tell us in a speech what is the point of view of India and the engagement of his major country. As you know, the purpose of the Global Diwan is to facilitate encounters between decision makers in Europe, the Middle East and the Gulf, and to facilitate as well outreach to major partners. And India, in that sense, is a major partner to our regions, to Europe, to the Middle East and the Gulf region. And when we say Global Diwan, the concept of Diwan, the word, is very familiar to our Indian partners, because everyone who has been to India knows Diwan-e-Khas and Diwan-e-Aam in major places which are visited by tourists and the ones who love and going to India. The Diwan is the place where debates, consultations are held, and where decisions are made. And so that's the purpose of this kind of meeting and of this webinar. The relationship between France and India, as you know, is, and of every partner which is working with each other, is based on trust. Trust is a key word, and I must say that the relationship between France and India is based on trust between our leaders. There is a strategic partnership, there is a strategic dialogue. I was myself involved in it, and we must know that with the major partner India, major partner for France, major partner for Europe, the broader spectrum of activities is covered, and we shall come back to those sectors during our webinar. There was also an important event which was held this year, which was the EU-India summit between Prime Minister Modi and the 27 heads of state and government, which has also underpinned the shared values we have with India, democracy, the values of freedom, individual freedom, freedom of undertaking, and the rule of law. So these are the values we stick to, and which are I would say the tracks on which we develop our relations. During this summit, there were also some perspectives given, in particular on green growth, also the idea of having setting up connectivity and putting in place infrastructures, physical infrastructures in many sectors, in particular digital, transportation, energy, and others. And so these are also, for the development of our ties, all the possibilities and the potentialities we have ahead of us. And I must say, though it will not be the purpose of our webinar today, but these cooperations we have together are also enframed in a wider cooperation in the Indo-Pacific area. This cooperation having as an aim of resisting against hegemonies and keeping our freedom and self-reliance. And that's something which is also to be mentioned. Between us, on the geographic world map, there is an important region between, I would say, Europe and India, which are Middle East and the Gulf region, with which our countries have very strong and ancient ties. In Europe, of course, France and Germany, and I would include as well Britain. You know that Britain is part of the advisory board of the Global Diwan. And I would say, in a way, that Middle East and the Gulf region are a sort of bridge, a pivot between our regions. And we know, and Ambassador Ashraf, of course, will develop much better than me, but India's ties with those regions are ancient and have been always very strong. So there is a sort of continuum, I would say, of our interests to reinforcing stability and prosperity. Now I would say it's up to the entrepreneurs to be the actors of our common destinies in the future. And I would like to welcome warmly all the ones who will, all our guest speakers who will intervene during our webinar. I would like to greet Mr. Sumeet Anand, who has just been re-elected as a chairman of the Indo-French Chamber of Commerce. And so congratulations, that shows the trust all your mandatories have in you. We have with us—
Thank you, Your Excellency.
We have with us two lawyers. One is a lawyer and a consultant, Mr. Akshay Jaitly, who is currently in Paris, and Mr. Amair Farooqui, who is French and who is currently in Delhi and who is an attorney at law in Paris and Delhi. We have the chance to have with us as well Mr. Patrick Viellard, who is the CEO of Egis Road Operations, and Mr. Luc Remont, who is head of international operations at Schneider Electric, and currently talking with us from Brazil, which will explain who will speak first, because there are some jet lag issues which have to be taken into account. So thank you so much. The debate will be monitored by Eric Schell, our executive chairman. And I would like now to give the floor or the mic or the screen to His Excellency Ambassador Javid Ashraf, thanking him again for being with us today. Thank you, Ambassador. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Montagne. You've always been such a warm and enthusiastic supporter of India-France partnership. You've made an enormous contribution to it, and you continue to do that in your role as the co-chair of Global Diwan. Very pleased to join you. Thank you for organizing this event. Thank you also, Mr. Eric Schell, and greetings also to my fellow speakers today, who I'm sure will be able to give very granular insights into what it is to do business with India. Luc Remont, Patrick Viellard, Akshay, who's a new old resident of Paris, Sumeet, Anand, and of course Amair Farooqui, who's Paris-based, but now also Delhi-based. So it's a great day to actually do this conference. It was perhaps a coincidence. But today we have delivered 1 billion doses of COVID vaccines in India. That means about 75% of India's rather vast population has had at least one dose of the vaccine. And all of this is largely by vaccines produced in India, including one that has been developed in India. Now, apart from the fact that it is helping us deal with this pandemic, it also reflects something about the nature of the business environment in India. One, it reflects a very close partnership between government, industry, laboratories, and the academic world. Of course, we were driven by the crisis, but it is the nature of the relationship that we were able to do it with the speed and scale that we have actually achieved. And it isn't just about the vaccines. It is also about the PPE kits, where we've become the second largest producer in the world. And we didn't have a single producer way back in March 2020. We've also become one of the largest producers of testing equipment. Again, we had a single laboratory. Today, there is a laboratory almost every street in the country. Well, at least more than 2,500. We are also back in the business of exporting vaccines and also contributing to the COVAXin, where the COVAX program, which is a multilateral initiative, in a sense spearheaded by President Macron. So this is just a glimpse of a changing environment of business in India. It wouldn't have been perhaps possible a few years ago to achieve the scale and speed. The pandemic at the moment, after an awful second wave, looks to be under a reasonable degree of control. We are very optimistic and confident about the path ahead. The economy is recovering well. We're likely to achieve, as the IMF has said, 9.5% growth this year, followed by another 8.5% next year, expected to remain the fastest growing major economy until at least 25, 26. It's been on the back of, I think, a broad-based recovery, including in consumer spending, in the infrastructure development, in government spending, which has been really high quality spending, 35% increase in the infrastructure spending. Exports are booming. We've reached levels we hadn't in 2019. And the private sector investment, which has been anemic, which has been weak over the past few years, is experiencing, after a cyclical downturn, renewed momentum. So all in all the components of growth point to a good direction. Seeing it from the factors of production side, agriculture is doing actually quite well now, and the new farm laws are expected to add additional momentum into farm to market initiative. As I mentioned, the foreign direct investment last year grew to 87 billion, a record high in India, and it was a 13% growth against a global decline of 42%. We are experiencing a similar surge this year. And in July 2021, for the first time in that month, we had more FDI than China. This was a big achievement. The foreign portfolio investments are also remaining high, despite the fact now, of course, that majority of what is driving the Indian stock market is domestic investment, which is also a reflection of the strength. Now, French businesses have all been, and again, I think what's important to also point out from a macroeconomic perspective is that we are expecting the inflation to remain within the boundary that we have targeted. And the government has been pretty prudent in spending over the past 1 year. So the centers and the state fiscal deficit should remain within controls. The value of the rupee should remain largely stable. So against this backdrop, we are looking ahead. We've also had a very strong, we've turned, like France has done, the period of crisis into also an opportunity for reforms. And there have been, since at least last June 2020, a series of major reforms taking place in the country, series of initiatives. As you all know, of course, that in terms of entry into India, this is almost every sector is on automatic approval, barring defense and certain railways and some very small sectors. So about 99% of those sectors have automatic approval, majority of 100% foreign direct investment, including there have been increase in limits for investments in defense and insurance, two very sensitive sectors. There have been reforms in agriculture, mining, manufacturing, in tax administration, in the small scale sector, in the labor laws, in the environmental laws. So all told, there has been a very high level of a reform period. Interestingly, this is also now percolating to the state. So in a federal setup, most businesses recognize that it is the state government which is really a key factor in business success and ease of doing business. And this is now a sort of a competitive and collaborative environment. The other important thing is that we're now focusing less on sort of opening up, because it's really opened up, but on ease of doing business in India and digitalization in India, both as an instrument of public policy for social good, but also to improve an environment where businesses can use digital technology for competitiveness and efficiency. It's been one of the most revolutionary changes that are taking place in India. So today, for example, now tax administration is becoming faceless. You've got one window through which all clearances have to be given. You're getting one window where you've got 480,000 hectares of land available throughout the country for businesses. So this is the way we are using digital technology now to, in a sense, make approval processes simple, transparent, and in a sense, easy to do through a single window. The other important element in this is the infrastructure, because most businesses have had this issue with infrastructure in India. It's both an opportunity as well as an ease of doing business. So you now have some major, of course, the scale of infrastructure expansion, ports, roads, airports, and power, etc., has been growing rapidly. But we now also have two major initiatives, which is the national monetization pipeline, which is to monetize $80 billion worth of brownfield investments, which have been largely in the hands of the government, opens up huge opportunities for both financial sector as well as real sector and companies in this business. Similarly, we've introduced a national infrastructure pipeline, which is a $1.4 trillion pipeline of projects which are designed, which are again huge opportunities. Now, foreign investment and foreign portfolio investments in the infrastructure sector is being both made easy and incentivized. So you've got a lot of tax breaks over the next few years for investments into this sector. So broadly speaking, the area, I mean, I could sort of go into greater detail, but this is a limited time that we have. But I just wanted to give a sense that while dealing with the pandemic, government has remained extremely focused on making it easy to do business, reforming labor laws, environmental laws, making land available, constant issues with investors. Also, as I said, the availability of approvals. And when you think that 44 labor laws are being codified into 4, it reflects a very fundamental change in the way we perceive businesses. Now, as far as France is concerned, I should say that French in business presence in India is actually very large, much more than I think is visible. When you think of perception map, you think of France essentially in terms of defense, security, politics, luxury goods. But if you look at both CAC 40 companies and smaller enterprises, and they're present in every critical sector. Many are doing extremely well. And in the last few months that I've had the opportunity to interact with a large number of CEOs, including more recently with the Schneider CEO and Remont, I get the following sort of takeaways. One is that India is by itself seen as an opportunity, which is because of the scale and the size of the market and the growth, and now the ease, radically improving ease of doing business. But the second is the recognition that the geopolitics of the world is going to now increasingly influence economic choices. And this is happening after maybe 30 years of the end of the Cold War. So there is technology and trade decoupling that is inevitable, as much from the Chinese side as from the others. There's also the realization of concentration risk, which we all discovered during the COVID period, and the need for diversified and resilient supply chains is become important. Then digitalization and ecological transition, two very important aspects of French thrust for economic reforms in the coming years, is also an enormous opportunity in India. Just yesterday, we had a bilateral business summit on hydrogen. It was a very successful one, large participation and very exciting opportunities there. But when we look at the perspective of where India is located, and this brings in Global Diwan in a particularly important way, is that India is an ideal launching pad now for Southeast Asia, 640 million people, growing at 5% a year, wanting not to be caught in geopolitical rivalries and choices. And on the other hand is the great markets of the Gulf and the Middle East, West Asia, where, as you know, UAE is our second or third largest partner, trading partner. It is a major hub for exports to Africa, re-exports to Africa from India. So I think in general, if you look at the Indo-Pacific region, India and France, as Prime Minister Modi told President Macron after September 15 AUKUS announcement, is that France is always seen in India as a premier and preeminent power in the Indo-Pacific region, a resident power, and for us, a premier relationship. And when we speak of this relationship, and Prime Minister said that during the Quad meeting, that France is indispensable for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region, and that for India, it remains a critical and a premier partner. The message was that it isn't just about what we do in defense and security. It is also what we do together in business, in connectivity, in sustainability. Not just what we do for ourselves in India and France, but how we're working together in the business sector enable us to help other countries in the Indo-Pacific region exercise sovereign choices and have access to alternative supply chains and development prospects. And this is an important thing. So when we think of a multipolar world, we need a multipolar economic world, we need a multipolar digital world. And from a strategic perspective, as well as from a business perspective, I think this is a very important relationship. But what is important when you go in, and this is where my other speakers come in, is that you're going into a market in a country with its own unique civilizational heritage. It can be complex. Whenever you enter a market, even if it's in Europe, you have to do a lot of due diligence. You have to take a lot of advice. You have to understand the cultural context, understand the legal and the regulatory environment in its true picture, know how to deal with contracts, be very careful about selecting partners, and because in all relationships, it really matters. Be very clear about which state you choose, how you decide your entry strategy. All of these are, I think, important. It's true of any market, but it will be particularly important when you enter a new, complex, but an exciting market like India. Big companies sometimes have the ease of their strength and their resources to do it themselves. They have the experience, but I think it is very important to have, for small companies and those entering India for the first time, to have the benefit of advice of those who've already been in India. And I see two speakers with enormous experience, one in infrastructure road and the other in an advanced technology of engineering and energy, but also two lawyers, Akshay, whom I introduced to you all, and Amair, who have guided many French companies in India and who are able to provide the kind of legal advice that French companies would need as they enter into India. When you make the right entry, sky's the limit for opportunities in India. So thank you. It's a very timely seminar, and a great set of speakers to guide us through the rest of the hour. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your welcome words. Now we will go deeper in the analysis of the French-Indian business relations. I will moderate this second part of the webinar. I will leave the floor first to two French companies who are very used to the Indian market, who are successful for many years there. And I will first ask Luc Remont, who is the Chief of International Operations of Schneider Electric, maybe to introduce his company and explain how he's operating in India.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schell. My warm greetings to Your Excellencies, Ambassador Ashraf and Ambassador Maurice Gourdault-Montagne, and of course, my very warm and friendly salutation to you, Maurice. Super happy to see you again after some years. Thank you very much for this opportunity. For once, I'm not speaking from India, even though I've been there for more than 3 months in the last year. But I am in Brazil, so thank you, and hopefully the link will be okay. And I'm very excited to share the experience of Schneider Electric in India over the past decades, because this has been a fantastic journey, quite frankly. We started over 5 decades ago, and we had an infancy in India. Following Ambassador Ashraf's recommendation, we were there to learn for long. I think the 3 first decades basically the last decades of the last century were made of learning really in the country with a business that at that time was not that big. We had a first step of acceleration after 2000, where we started really to ramp up organically our business, both for India and for the globe. This is when we started really to have a dedicated strategy to grow in India organically. Our business is made of technology, as you said. We serve all kind of infrastructure to help the infrastructure to be efficient in their energy usage, and to also help to digitize the processes of the industry and of the buildings. And that's organic phase of growth came when India started with its journey of acceleration of electrification and of industrialization. This second phase lasted for 2 decades. And at the same time, we are permanently looking at opportunities to do more in India. And we started discussions with partners, with potential add-ons to what we were doing in India. And we have had a major step last year in 2020, in the middle of COVID, at the peak of the first wave, actually. We closed the get-together, the merger in India of our operations with Larsen & Toubro Electrical and Automation, which of course changed completely the scale of what we are doing in the country. And now we are focusing on continuing to develop our business for India as, I should say, hopefully an Indian company. That's really how we want to define ourselves in India. We have now more than 30,000 colleagues in India. We have less than 5 expats today out of these 30,000 colleagues. None of the expats are bosses. This is really an entirely Indian-run business. We have some experts, of course, but we have also many Indians as expats elsewhere. Indian passport is now becoming close to the largest community of expats in Schneider Electric, overcoming the French. And this is probably going to be the case in the future. So this shows the direction of how India has become important within Schneider Electric. It's now the 3rd largest country of operations after US and China, slightly ahead of France since now the merger with Larsen & Toubro. And that's the sense of history. This is how things should go, of course. So, so this has been, in a very nutshell, our journey over the last few decades. And the key lessons learned that I can share with my colleagues is, first, we have been constant. We really, since the beginning, wanted to be in India, to be really part of the economy, to be ourselves, not a multinational company coming into India. We really wanted to be part of it. And I think this philosophy has been a winning game. And that's the philosophy of Schneider everywhere, but it was particularly true in India. Second, we have overcome the little hiccups. Of course, India is an emerging market, so we have had times where it was harder than others, and we have never withdrawn. We have kept our steady direction over the times, and we have been very much helped, I have to say, at every single step by the Indian authorities, who have been always supporting and welcoming, clearly. So whenever we were facing challenges, moments, we have always found the Indian authorities in a key direction to support us doing more in India. Now, our strategy going forward is really to build in India what we call the 4th hub of Schneider Electric. The history of Schneider started in Europe. This has been historically the first hub made essentially in France. A hub for us means where we have both R&D, manufacturing, and a big market, which brings together all the components of what Schneider can bring in a meaningful critical mass. So Europe was the first one, US was the second one, made inorganically by an acquisition in the early 90s. China has been the 3rd one with the acceleration of China at the beginning of the years 2000, mostly organically. Really, India is now the 4th one. And we want to build this hub as a self-reliant one. So the way we describe it internally is that we have an Atmanirbhar strategy for India, where we really built our capacities in India from R&D, manufacturing, and of course, ability to deploy in the market of India, something that doesn't need the support from anyone else in the group. We can always support, but it doesn't have to need it to continue to move forward. I have to say that this triggers a lot of enthusiasm and energy in our teams to build that fourth hub. This hub is not just working for India, it's primarily working for India as a market, but India becomes now, as a hub, a platform to export to all other countries globally. And of course, as Ambassador Ashraf was saying, also with a specific angle and a specific value added coming from an emerging market DNA for all the adjacent markets. So as you were saying, clearly Southeast Asia is an obvious case for us to work from India, and Middle East Africa as well. And there are big communities of India in these countries, which of course help as well the deployment of know-how and technologies coming from India. So that's clearly one of the strategic axes on which we are working. So how do we build that? So we have, as I was saying, more than 30,000 colleagues now in India, out of which more than 4,000 engineers and software developers. So it becomes one of the big platforms of the globe, notably on software, but not only, also on the core R&D capacities that are needed for technology that are electromechanical and electronics. We have, I have to say, because I spend a lot of time on that in India, a level of skills that is really impressive. And we have no difficulties to find the right skills to continue to develop our R&D at at the top level. The best universities of India have nothing to envy to other parts of the world. And clearly we are hoping to contribute to further develop that ecosystem. We work with our partners so that we can train every year over 25,000 people to the electricity technologies and digital technologies in India, for India, because we consider that this is part of our responsibility as an Indian company to be deeply entrenched into the ecosystem and the community and to contribute to the skills that are necessary to develop the country. And clearly electrification and digital skills are part of the essential competences that are necessary to scale. So these are the key elements on how we are going to continue to structure this hub approach. Export is a very important element through manufacturing. So we have 33 factories now in India. They are in all states of India almost. And some of those are, of course, lighthouses in terms of smart manufacturing, because we deploy in these factories all the technologies that we think we can share with our customers and partners in India as well. So we have digitized our factory in India as the most advanced that we have elsewhere in the world. Now, looking at the market of India itself today, I would like to stress a few elements. First, we have seen some very strong transformations led by the Indian government over the last few years that are really helping to develop business. I'm a former civil servant working in the Ministry of Finance long time ago. I can share that what I saw of the GST transformation a couple of years ago, moving to a full nationwide GST, fully digitized for all companies and individuals, is absolutely impressive. So now this GST system is fully digitized on the entire nation. And frankly, I've not seen such a transformation in other countries. And this has been a massive improvement on the way of doing business for companies like us, who are selling to many, many different entities in all the states of India. And of course, are looking for simplified way of doing business and trustful ways of doing business. Digital is really bringing this. So that's one example, but there are many others. The other elements that I would like to highlight is I see a very strong acceleration of infrastructure efforts and electrification, digitization. On digitization, the Indian market is providing probably the best capacities in the world and showing both the most advanced deployment of digitization. So to give you an example, we did in India the first fully digitized greenfield smart city connecting all the utilities of not a large city, but it was a greenfield starting from scratch, everything connected from water to utilities of all kinds, including electricity. So, and there was no equivalent in the world at that time. There was a couple of years ago. So it shows that we can have in digital the most advanced features in India. At the same time, of course, this is a very big population, so we need to help and bring the full population and the full market to this level of opportunity, and that's clearly what we commit to as a company focused on technology to help India in this journey. On infrastructure, we are trying to do our best to support the effort that is led by the government and the local governments. And we see a very strong acceleration of the infrastructure journey, particularly, I should say, and I will conclude with this not to be too long, particularly on the energy agenda. We are seeing a very strong acceleration of the green energy agenda of India, which might lead, and this is my hope, India to be the first large country fully deploying at scale the renewable and decentralized agenda on being the, let's say, the infrastructure of energy of the future, where more and more people take ownership of their energy in a renewable way and make it much more sustainable at the scale of a large country. I will stop there, and thank you very much for your time. And of course, anyone who would like to ask questions or needs help in India is welcome to connect with me. Thank you very much.
I think Mr. Schell,
you're on mute.
Yeah.
Eric, you're on mute. We can't hear you, Eric.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm back. Thank you, Luc, for your introduction and explanations. I've read in the press that you are also working on the new efficient and sustainable metro system in major cities in India. Maybe Egis, which is one of another French company specialized in successful infrastructures, would give us more detail on what they are doing with metros, airports, smart cities, and highways in India.
Yeah.
I will leave the floor to Patrick Viellard, who is in charge of roads and infrastructure for Egis. And I will just mention that Egis is one of first supporters of the Global Diwan as a platform. And I will thank Patrick to be here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schell. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador Ashraf and Mr. Ambassador Gourdault-Montagne, for introducing the scene and the context in which we try to debate now the practicalities of doing business in India. I will try to describe what is Egis, because it will give you the idea of the profile of the company. And I will try also to give my experience in practical terms, because I think besides the big direction that we see clearly as positive context and trends which are supporting our business, if we decide to go and do business in India, we need to be equipped with some tips and to share also the practicalities of this development. So Egis is an international consulting group with also activities in project structuring and operation and maintenance, mainly of highways and airports. So 2/3 of the activity is on engineering and consultancy services, and the third is on O&M services, mainly in airports and roads. So Egis has been active in India for 25 years, and India has been selected as a very first market because also at that time the potential of the local market was extremely high, and the journey has been, as was said before, extremely positive for Egis in India, but not only for India itself, and I will come to this. India has been perceived as, of course, and Mr. Ambassador Ashraf, you gave the number and the volumes of investments that are currently being made for infrastructure on roads, on ports, airports, all type of infrastructure and energy, of course. For itself, the potential of the Indian market is huge, in particular in infrastructure. But also going on the way, we have realized that India has the capabilities and the skills to be a hub for the whole world. Egis has decided to set up a design center in India, which is providing services not only for India, but for the exports. In other terms, coming first in India for the Indian market, it has been understood that India has all the features, the language, the courts that are running correctly, and we can rely on contracts. The modalities of developing the business are all becoming extremely positive for India, being perceived as a hub to export services. And this choice has been made by Egis, and therefore India is the biggest design center for Egis. That means we design in India for our contracts throughout the world. I will come now to road operation and maintenance, which is my personal experience on how to proceed, and it has been stressed before. India was initially perceived as a market where it is complex to establish because of local rules or administration difficulties. This is today a place where it is extremely simple to register. The GST or directorship can be made online within seconds. And I was amazed. I came to India in 2008. The first time I registered as a director there, it was a heavy exercise to go throughout the administration process. Now it takes a few clicks just to update the file and to become a director for a company. So the administration part has made tremendous progress, and it was said before by Mr. Remont. It is easier in India than in many other countries, and I would say easier probably than in France. So we are now at a stage where we have been commenting, and we discover that great things are done, and we are not surprised at all. It was said before, and I can confirm it, the skills that are available in India are remarkable. And when it comes to developing a tool for digitalization, we always go through India, whatever the place where we intend to develop it. When it comes to also my personal experience, we considered the business through a partnership initially. My personal experience was that this partnership was not successful, but we decided to terminate it in a peaceful way, and we continued. So it's not because an experience of partnership is not successful that we have no solution. We can change partner, of course. We finally decided that we would go on our own, but the whole team is Indian, but we did not go for a very long route with an Indian company as a partner. The reason of this is that we had a lack of exact alignment of our strategy, and therefore we could not continue because the company itself could not proceed further on the Indian market as a partnership. So my personal experience is that this partnership has proven a bit difficult, but was not blocking. Another, maybe a tip that I would give you give to the audience to develop business in India is to rely on key players or key personalities to develop. It's potentially crucial, in my view, to secure a management by efficient person, Indian person. I would say it's a must to clearly understand the networks. We have no expat anymore in O&M services in India. It's all run by Indian person, and we pay real attention of the fidelity. India is known as a country with a high turnover of people in companies, so it's key to secure key managers with a lot of fidelity, and that means, as was described in Schneider a few minutes ago, ensuring that these people and this manager are part of the global network of the companies throughout the world. It's one of the key conditions that Indians are not perceived for the Indian market, but for the whole activity of the group. Maybe a last point in my analysis of this market, India is driven by, the Indian market is driven by low prices, so it's extremely important to be competitive. There are many players who are interested. It's therefore very important to identify what is the differentiating factor and where we create value, especially when we do not come with an expertise or a technology that is unique. As we know, all technologies can be deployed in India, and there are many players extremely reactive. So it's important to determine the reason why the value that we create in this market is unique. And once you have this, we really have a key for an extremely large market. And at the second stage, for using this local presence in India to go abroad from the Indian basis. As a conclusion, I would say we see India as a place where doing business is now easy, provided we tick the boxes of having a right posture in the market, a right value creation. And I'm sure that the relation between France and India will ensure that we are confident over the decade. So we do not hesitate to invest because we know that the framework set by the government is extremely positive. And therefore, I really share the joy that was described, that the journey in India is extremely positive for Egis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Luc, for your two testimonials. It was very interesting to give the floor, to leave the floor to important French companies who are still on the market and who open doors and perspective to others. You spoke of experience, of tips. It's important to rely on trustful partners, and I would like now to open the floor to our lawyers, and first to Amair, who could provide us with some piece of advice about how is the legal and business framework in India. Amair.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Esteemed ambassador, dear speakers, dear friends. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for your interest in India. I'm Amair Farooqui. I'm a French-Indian lawyer. I work for the law firm Bignon, Lebray. I'm trilingual. I speak French, English, and Hindi, and I specialize into corporate law and merger acquisition. I've been in India for the past 6 years. I've also been appointed as a legal counsel to the French embassy since 2017 because of the cases I've handled, and also because I lived and work in France and I lived and work in India. So I have a broad understanding of both countries. I've been instructed to tell you about the legal system in India from an investor's point of view. So actually I'll not bore you with the structures and existing legal entities. Also, I won't try to give you a distorted business landscape of India. I think in the current context, it's important to face the reality and not be delusional. And I'd like to say that if you're looking at the Indian market, maybe you should focus on sectors and areas that are still working at full 100 capacity. Here I'm thinking of the IT sector, for instance, with Capgemini, Atos, a system, or you even have companies in the medical industry, as we've already said, that are doing a fantastic year with Air Liquide, for instance. Now, generally, a new investor in India always has this eternal question in his mind. Should he enter in India on his own or with an Indian partner? Some of you already tackled that subject, but I'd like to say that it's important to first identify your sector, because there are business projects where you need an Indian partner. And second point, there are business projects where you don't need an Indian partner, actually. So first, I'll start with projects where you need an Indian partner. You have strategic sectors, but not limited to, for instance, insurance or investment in brownfield pharmaceutical that will require you to have an Indian partner, because in these sectors, your investment would be capped to a certain equity threshold. You will also require an Indian partner because you may be new to the Indian market, and to distribute your product, you will need just a huge network of distributors. And also because not only you need distributors, but you need them to be present in several states. And on top of that, you may also require licenses. So because of all these reasons, you may need an Indian partner. Now, coming to the second point, of course, you have business projects where you don't require an Indian partner. I have a client in the medical industry who's manufacturing medical devices in Maharashtra for the past 5 years. And this was possible only because India is an open and competitive market that requires the unique and modern technology. So it really depends on the sector. Here, I would like to add that you should not think that Indians are looking for cheap products. It is indeed a price-sensitive market with a difference in terms of purchasing power. But I've also seen companies, for instance, in the agribusiness industry selling high-end products at an expensive price, and Indian distributors are ready to pay for it because of the technicality of the product. So sometimes it's not a matter of money, but the end services that you'll be able to provide or the end product that you'll be able to provide. You have, for instance, the Groupe Roulier, who are commercializing fertilizers, products that are pretty expensive in India. But there's a huge demand for it in India on the specific product because of its technicality. Even recent acquisition during COVID time targeted companies that have specific knowledge not available everywhere. There's the case for Assystem and their recent acquisition of 2 Indian engineering companies. If you look at the recent operation, the deals we're talking about and the actors that are entering India, they all are here to offer new solutions. I'll take, for instance, IDEMIA. They provide fintech biometric solutions and face recognition solutions to banks, governments, and even airports, which is completely new for India. And now with the current climate crisis, even you also see green investment that are increasing exponentially even in times of COVID. And you have actors like Technique Solaire that are investing a huge amount in India, and they're contributing to the energy transition. And there is obviously a huge demand in India for such transition from coal to nuclear, with even bigger players, for instance, the French energy giant EDF. Over the years, India has built a solid industry and expertise in the solar sector and the renewable energy. This will be discussed later on by Akshay for sure, but it will certainly, for me, continue, accelerate, and improve its energy transition. Here, because we are talking about infrastructure, international partnership, both in public and private sectors, I'm convinced that this will contribute to fund the massive investment required across all sectors. And this is not only me saying this. It is also the IMF chief economist Gita Gopinath, who recently insisted and stated that public infrastructure investment is one of the biggest priorities for India, which means that for you in the upcoming months, there'll be without any hesitation a huge increase in the number of public tenders and also in the numbers of public-private partnerships. So you should definitely stay tuned for that. Now, with the current COVID situation, I'd like to emphasize on how India took huge steps for its economy. It's a well-known fact that in 2014, India was ranked 142 on the ease of doing business. And in 2020, it was ranked 63. Trust me, this was not done overnight. But what's great about it is that India is a democratic country. It has always been open to criticism. Recently, it even acknowledged that its biggest weakness is in the ease of doing business is the enforcement of contracts. But the Indian government did not sit on this. It worked on finding a remedy to this problem. It has dedicated a special task force for the enforcement of contracts. The Department of Justice is working on it. They even created e-court services for such complaints. And something even more quite surprising, virtual hearings have become quite common, which is something we don't see yet in France, not even in Europe. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a real support from the Minister of Justice, not only on the previous initiatives, but also through the Arbitration Council of India, which is promoting mediation, arbitration, conciliation as a way actually to relieve courts from their load. So I'm not going to list you all the reforms, but India keeps on reforming its laws with the sole objective to improve the business ecosystem. Even recently, India used to have retrospective tax on indirect transfer of Indian assets. It firmly scrapped this law just to address this issue that was faced by several foreign companies that were complaining about this. India even reduced its effective corporate tax rate for new manufacturing companies to 17%, just to please foreign companies. So it can't be denied that India is punching above its weight, making tremendous efforts to keep its economy not just strong, but also attractive. Now, coming to a subject where I'm less specialized, which is the Middle East countries. As I was saying previously, infrastructures are indeed a priority for India, and many Arab companies such as Emaar Properties are developing residential and commercial units all across India. And you also see recently new investment coming from the Lulu Group, which is pretty famous among Indians, with Yusuf Ali, who's opening a mall in Bangalore and who's going to open 3 other malls in Kochi, Trivandrum, and Lucknow. You also have other investment in the real estate sector from these companies, Crown Capital investment into India Bulls. Or you even have investments in unicorns such as Big Basket, Ola, and Zomato, which have received fundings from the Middle East venture capital funds and even private equity investors. All I'm trying to say is that there are several other companies from the Arabic world operating in India, as India is definitely a second home to these companies who are investing in diverse sectors ranging from energy, infrastructure, and ports to tourism and agriculture. Lastly, and to conclude, I'd like to say that I can strongly assure you that India has this philosophy of believing that their foreign investors are their biggest ambassadors, so that through their success stories, they can attract even more foreign companies to vouch for its attractiveness. Thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Amair. You are a very efficient bridge between Europe and France and India, your mother country. I would like to mention that for the moment, the United Arab Emirates are investing in energy transition in India. And it's the way to leave the floor to Akshay, who is a consultant in energy sector, and who will maybe more precise on this very diversified and increasing sector in India. Akshay, it's your turn to develop.
Thank you. Point. Thank you, Eric, and greetings to my fellow panelists, particularly the ambassadors. About myself, I've practiced as a lawyer in India for over 25 years, in India and overseas, and moved to Paris last year, where I work as a strategic and policy consultant, largely on energy and infrastructure issues, which is what most of my practice in India was about. Luke just left, but I'm happy to say that my former firm, Trilegal, which I helped to found, was one of the firms that helped him in the Larsen and Toubro merger, which catapulted the size of Schneider to new heights. What I'm going to talk about is slightly within the theme of the Global Diwan, which is looking at a slightly broader perspective in relation to India's energy transition, and why this is an idea whose time has come, and why it's an area which is ripe for a lot of different types of investment in the future. And in doing so, it's one of the themes that we've been hearing through the different presentations has been how the best companies and the best businesses find opportunities when there is adversity. There is no doubt that today climate change and global warming and the energy transition is one of the major problems that the world is facing. But while we must be concerned about it as a problem, we also must look for opportunities out of that. And I have a small presentation which I'm going to just kick off, which I will take you through. The screen sharing is disabled at the moment. I just needed to.
I hope it will. I will ask our moderator.
Yeah, it's on now.
Yeah, it's okay.
So here we go. So as I said, I'm looking at the opportunities that that India offers in relation to the global energy transition. Quickly going through what the problem is. This is the #1 global issue post-COVID. And there are three big numbers that we should be concerned about, which is the 55 gigatons a year worldwide, which, if held constant, the Paris Agreement works. For 2055, however, we are going to get to 80 gigatons, and we really need to be at 0. So the change that's required by 2055 compared with today's business, 80 gigatons compared with present trends. So big job to do. It's also something that matters a lot to people, especially in the developed world. The numbers from Pew are there on your screen. It's close to 3/4 of the population believes that this is something something needs to be done about, and that they themselves are willing to make adjustments in their lives to do this. And people also feel that not enough is being done at the moment, which is why there is a lot of opportunity. We have the G20 in Rome, and then the COP26 coming up in Glasgow at the end of this month. Developed nations want a more ambitious plan at the G20 summit in Rome. And then, of course, they want those to be articulated at COP, whereas India, China, Brazil, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia have concerns in relation to this. And most of the concerns relate to the issue of climate equity. The BRICS New Delhi Declaration a couple of months ago reaffirmed the UN principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. And as a matter of fact, India, with almost 20% of the world population, only accounts for less than 3.5% of cumulative emissions. But the interesting thing is that the world expects more from India and expects more from developed countries. And this statement from John Kerry is very interesting, where he says, I'm not suggesting that everyone has to do the same things, but everyone has to lay out a plan on what the energy sector is going to do. So clearly there is a lot of expectation here. Very quickly, climate change is an issue of great importance for India, apart from the impact on the globe, but because of the potential impacts on India itself. I'm not going to go through all the details on this slide, but you can see that the consequences to India of the world not doing enough for climate change are quite severe. On the other hand, India is very important for the global energy transition. And the path to a sustainable global energy transition runs directly through India. India is the 4th largest source of emissions. We had 4% in 2000, 7% today. Annual emissions are at 2.6 gigatons. The compound growth rate is at about 5% a year. The carbon intensity of energy production has also grown and will most likely grow further. Economic growth had slowed down in the last few years, but as the ambassador pointed out, the IMF is now predicting over 9% growth for this year and over 8% growth for next year. So we can expect that, as with growth, energy demand will also increase to somewhere between 30 to 50% between 2019 and 30, as will emissions. And the power sector here is the key, because it accounts for 1/3 of India's emissions and around 50% of fuel-related emissions. And it's also the one that's most susceptible to transformation, as it is largely formalized. India's performance on the energy transition so far has been quite good, despite, as I said, the fact that there's almost no historical responsibility and that per capita current emissions are low. We have still done quite well in relation to our commitments under the Paris agreements. So the key nationally determined contribution that India undertook was to have 40% of electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030. And as of the 30th of September, the end of last month, it's out of the total installed capacity of 388 gigawatts, we have about 101 gigawatts of renewables, which is already at almost 38% of installed capacity. So we're on the way to fulfilling our commitments by 2030. So India is doing quite well here. If you look at other aspects of India's performance, why is it that we're doing well? We have a target of 175 gigawatts of renewables by 2022 and 450 gigawatts by 2030. And as I said, current installed capacity is at 101. There are also significant other steps that have been taken on electric vehicles and storage. There is a national mission on transformative mobility and battery storage. There's a huge push to energy efficient lighting in all major cities of India. So somebody mentioned earlier about the electrification of rail and metros. Delhi Metro now runs significantly on renewables based on a large power purchase agreement that it entered into with the state of Madhya Pradesh. And there are other very innovative solutions like solar water pumps, which provides a disaggregated solution to certain aspects of the energy solution. As you all know, India has also been a champion of the International Solar Alliance, together very much with France. And this is an area in which India has sort of shown its leadership in relation to solving the problem worldwide. And we hear rumors that India may well increase its NDCs in the near future, but we will not embarrass anyone by making any predictions there. There's a lot of European and Middle East presence in the Indian climate transition. And this is at two levels. It's at the level both of bilateral and multilateral engagement, as well as at the level of investment. So India and France signed an MOU earlier this year where there is an agreement to cooperate on solar, wind, hydrogen, and biomass. And the ambassador mentioned that there was a summit on hydrogen just yesterday, which is going to advance this agenda quite quickly. International Solar Alliance, I've just mentioned. The EU and India have a clean energy and climate partnership, which after a few years of being slightly dormant has been revived earlier this year, and we can expect quite a lot of bilateral activity there. And then, for instance, there are also activities with other major economies in Europe, such as Germany. In relation to investment, Amair mentioned that there were quite a few French companies that are involved in India. It's not just quite a few, but it's the biggest ones. Engie, Total, EDF, Schneider, Proparco are all involved and have significant investments in India with thousands of gigawatts of renewables. From Italy, you've got Enel and FRV, again, thousands of megawatts, and Scandinavian presence is also significant. And as we're also focusing on the Middle East, there are big investments coming in from the Middle East. There's also a bilateral engagement with countries like the UAE, but there are also significant private investments and sovereign wealth investments. IDA, for example, has got investments in two of India's largest renewable energy companies, Greenco and Renew. Al Fanar from Saudi Arabia has also big plans in India, already have quite a few hundred megawatts on the ground, as do Mubadala and Masdar. With quite robust growth targets for the manufacturing sector having been set by the government of India, and the ambition of increasing manufacturing contribution in GDP from 16% to 25%. This will increase emissions, but it also provides a huge opportunity for growth, as do the pressures on India that are likely to come as a consequence of global geopolitics. Again, John Kerry says that he's confident that India is going to announce one thing or another going into COP, as well as will many others. So he anticipates increase in ambition from many places. Now, this kind of subtle pressure will over time have some impact, and India is likely over time to come up with revised NDCs, is going to have a net zero target for emissions at some point in time, and may have to deal with issues such as carbon border taxes in Europe, the United States, and elsewhere. But as I said, all of these provide opportunities. So the renewable energy sector, as I said, has done quite well in India with a lot of activity. However, India saw only about $6.5 billion of the over just about $300 billion worth of investment in renewable energy in 2020. By way of comparison, Europe had 80 and China had 80 billion. So there's a lot of scope of improvement over there. And there are also, that scope of improvement is helped by the fact that there are many now sources of climate finance. Just as an example, on the private side, 6 US banks, the names are on the screen, have committed to invest just over $4 trillion in the global energy transition. The ESG finance community, as estimated by Bloomberg, is at about $40 trillion. This is broadly defined, so a lot of different types of investments qualify here. There's the climate finance commitment under the Paris Agreement of $100 billion to flow to the developed countries, which has not been fulfilled yet, so there's scope for improvement there. And then there's the European Green Deal, which foresees a lot of activity by European countries, not just within Europe, but outside Europe, in order to solve the problem. And India is looking to receive a substantial portion of these funds. And why is it that India is likely to receive a lot of these funds, and why attention deservingly is focused on this? A lot of the other speakers have spoken about the positive changes that have been made in various different areas of doing business, which all have an impact on the renewable energy sector as well, and or more broadly on the clean tech sector. But also there's the additional imperative of the energy transition on top of the more favorable conditions within India for these investments. So what India will be looking to do is to seek out positive sum games and improve the conditions for energy transition investments in India and access a larger chunk of the climate finance that is now available globally for energy transition. So what will happen here? Renewables will continue to be built out at scale. There is a 300 gigawatt opportunity here between now and 2030. There are significant Indian companies who are involved in this, but there are also, as I said, apart from the French companies mentioned, companies from the US, elsewhere in Europe, and Japan, which are involved in the renewable sector. There's going to be a huge amount of activity in building out the electrical vehicle fleet. There is a national mission on transformative mobility and battery storage, which provides the overall framework within which there is a target to 2030 of 65% of new vehicle sales coming from electric vehicles. This will require 200 billion worth of investment, and this is going to reduce road transport emissions by 15%. So you see the positive sum games over here. You see the investment coming in, you see emissions going down, and you also see an improvement in the transport system in the country. And every major city in India now is procuring hundreds of vehicles, in some cases thousands of vehicles, for their electric bus programs. India is also betting big on emerging technologies. Hydrogen, we mentioned, there is a national hydrogen mission, the details of which are awaited, but it promises to provide a lot of opportunities for Europe-India cooperation in developing the hydrogen market. Storage will continue to be very big, and not just battery storage, but other forms of storage as well. And here's an interesting one where we are not talking about just the very large French or European or Middle Eastern companies, but smaller companies in the clean tech space who could provide services and other activities on demand side management. We're talking about things like energy efficiency, smart grids, which involves that Schneider, for instance, is involved in, which involves a lot of software and programming, smart metering, smart lighting, and the use of IoT to improve the efficiency of manufacturing processes and systems. There are some things on India's to-do list as well, which is creating the conditions for a nationwide carbon tax, which will provide a price for carbon, which will provide signals to the market on where the investment should most viable investment should come. And also, if you make the power sector a little more market-driven, that will again help a wider range of companies to come into India, not just the largest ones. So here we are. Just thought I'd present some opportunities. As you can see, they are quite significant, and Indian companies are also already deeply involved, as are some of the larger French and international ones. But I think the country is now looking to the next wave of both institutional investment as well as utilities to come in and profit from this market. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay. It was very interesting and detailed. With your authorization and with the authorization of Amair, I will say that we could share your documents on the LinkedIn of the Global Diwan. We will put it on there for the audience and the followers of LinkedIn. They can be more impressed by the quality of your papers. It's time now to conclude, and I will conclude with Sumeet, who has been brilliantly re-elected as the chair of the French-Indian Chamber of Commerce. Could you speak to all of us about the perspective of this Chamber of Commerce and then your ambitions and what we could do at the conclusion of this, we could say at the conclusion of this webinar?
Sure, Eric. Thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. It's been a fascinating discussion. I think we've all learned a lot. I can relate to a lot of it, and in a minute you'll know why. Maybe I'll just introduce myself. I'm the founder of IndSight Growth Partners, which is a strategy consulting and advisory firm I set up about 10 years ago. Prior to that, I spent 15 years working for French multinationals. I helped found Pernod Ricard in India, and India is the third largest market for Pernod in the world. I was the first country manager for Seven Savongra in the agro sector. And so 20 years ago, I was part of the move to localize talent with the local leadership. And then I went on to set up IndSight. I've also had the good fortune to be associated with a very dynamic Chamber of Commerce, one of the top chambers in the French network worldwide, and clearly the most dynamic bilateral chamber, in my view, in India, punching above its weight relative to the Americans, the Brits, and the Germans. And I would invite everybody to go discover the chamber on the LinkedIn and website, and you'll see that we have a presence across India with in five chapters, the top 300 French companies that are members. We do about 100 events. And with the support of His Excellency Ambassador Ashraf, we will be soon launching an IFCI France-India Business Club to be based in Paris. And we will bring some of this content and success stories that you've heard about today to head office, to Paris, which is so important to encourage the investment into India. And I have the good fortune professionally to advise many of the large CAC 40 SBF 120 companies on both entry strategy, as well as to work with their managing directors in India on their business plans and growth strategies for India. I think it's been a fascinating discussion because we've got a sense of what's going on between the France-India business relations. And as we can see, there's a lot happening. I often say this is a young relationship. If you go back maybe 10 years ago, many of these large French companies did not have significant businesses. I think it's a reflection of how India has changed. To put it in perspective, when I came back to India 25 years ago, it was a $500 billion economy. It was one of the large mid-sized economies of the world. We're now a $3 trillion economy. We're the number 6, number 5th economy of the world. In the coming decade, we are going to double the size of this economy. So we're going to add another $3 trillion. That's really the opportunity here for all investors, foreign and domestic. I think what's changed from a French standpoint is there are certain sectors where the French are strong. They tend to be technology sectors, infrastructure sectors. And the first growth story of India in the 2000s was largely around consumption. And if we see what has happened and led by reforms of the government, which we've heard so much about today, and is that we have now sectors where French companies are strong, where we have an environment where it is easier to do business, where we can have visibility around investment, we can have visibility around returns on that investment. And therefore, we have companies in sectors such as energy, infra, transport, railways, all sectors which require long-term investment, now investing in India. If you look at the 3 biggest investments from France to India, and in the last year, Total putting 3.5 billion euros to work in India in renewable energy, and as part of their global strategy, or Airport de Paris putting €1 billion to invest in India, the largest investment outside Europe, in fact, in the Delhi and the Hyderabad airport. It's an aviation sector. And if you look at Schneider, who was with us earlier, and the €2 billion investment that they've made. So I think these are symbols of success in sectors which were where the Indian government has led reforms and which today represent an opportunity for French companies. We can talk also about smart cities and investments by companies like Veolia and Suez, which will continue to grow. So I think there's been a change in the Indian context, there's a change in the French context. And I think that's really good from an India perspective. And we've heard a lot about that today. So that would be just to give some color to what we've heard. Maybe if I had to conclude on what we also heard of the key success factors of doing business in India. And I often say to my clients, there are 6, and I'll share those, and you'll see that they connect with the testimonials we've heard today. The first one is really to have long-term commitment to India at the top of the group, right? You have to have leadership at the highest level of the group that believes that India is a market for the next decade or 2 for that company, right? The second is to leverage all of India's opportunities, whether it is as a growing market, whether it is as a source of talent, or whether it is now increasingly so as a source of supply chain in the changing geopolitical context. And we've seen in the examples of Egis and Schneider that they're doing just that. The third is to actually look at both organic opportunities in India, because you can start it in your own, as Amair explained. You don't necessarily need a partner. You can hire talent. You can have the best of advisors available that are professional and Western educated to build your own business in India, but you can also acquire in India. The case of Schneider, they probably bought a company from one of India's most professional companies, but largely India is a family business economy. And there's small, mid, large family-owned companies where there are opportunities to acquire businesses, right? So you have both strategies available, and you should deploy both to succeed. And we heard that today. The other success factor is to have local leadership and empowered local leadership, right? Decentralized, empowered local leadership, because they will ultimately understand best the opportunity to succeed in the Indian market. The fifth one, I would say, is to have an adapted operating model, which is a business model, a success model that works in India, whether it's because it's adapted to the consumer base and their purchasing power, or whether it is because it's adapted to the changing India. As we heard some examples when Amair talked about specialty technology, fintech technology, biometric technology, things which we would not imagine are opportunities in India, but at the scale of India, they really can become sizable. Again, have an adapted operating business model in India. And the last, I would say, and I've often talked about this, is the importance to build reputation and manage policy in India. India is very welcoming of foreign investors, as we've heard. In India, you have a level playing field compared to many other large countries in the world. Indian consumers and the Indian government understands that we need capital, we need technology to grow our country, and the consumers are very open-minded. They're a very international country in that sense. The Indian diaspora lives all over the world. We send our youngsters to study around the world. With France itself, we've now quintupled the number of Indian students in France in the last 5 years, and I know France has an objective of doubling that again. So we're a very open, democratic, international country and people, and therefore you have a responsibility here, just like you have in your own home markets, to work with government, to work with policymakers, to work with stakeholders, to build your reputation and manage that reputation. And I think that's an important success factor also. So I think we've heard a lot of that today in all of that was said, right? So I think that is perhaps maybe one way of concluding, Eric, on that part. I'm looking at the time. I probably will just say one last thing, which is on the Euro-Arab perspective. It's a very interesting question. And I'm very fascinated that we are doing this event with Global Diwan, Eric, because it's true that Europe and the Middle East have historical links, right? Cultural, financial, investment, trade. In India, our links are also very deep, especially with the Gulf, right? Whether it is in terms of people, we have 9 million Indians that live in the Gulf. We are 38% of UAE's population. Very important in terms of energy. We spoke about that today, and Excellency Ambassador Javed Ashraf referred to UAE being our second or third largest trading partner. But I think what has changed, and again led by government efforts of our current government, is the government-to-government relationship has changed dramatically in the last few years, right? And therefore, what you're beginning to see on the back of that is opportunities for both capital partnership opportunities and I would say market partnership opportunities. And we saw in Akshay's presentation how capital is available in the Middle East to come to India. Some of that capital can be leveraged for European companies to build businesses in India, right? And India needs capital, and India needs technology. So in that sense, the Arab world, the Gulf world can play that role for India. A bit maybe like in the case of China, maybe Singapore or Hong Kong played that role, right? And honestly, with COVID, Dubai has really shown its ability to be an entry hub to many parts of the world. And we have a lot of connectivity with the Gulf in any case. And the other is in terms of market for Indian companies, for Indian talent. The Gulf and the Middle East is a huge opportunity. And there are opportunities to partner here with European companies to conquer those markets, as Ambassador Ashraf mentioned as well. So I think there is clearly a new opportunity here to play in different directions between Euro, Arab, Gulf, India. And I think that's an interesting debate to have had on that. And I hope with that, Eric, I've done justice to your expectation on the conclusion, but very happy to be here.
Sumeet, thank you. I welcome the idea of creating an Indian-French business club in Paris in the coming weeks, and we will be happy to be part of it and to organize common events with our Diwaniyas of the Global Diwan. So you are most welcome. I just want to mention that on November the 2nd in Paris, we will hold our first Diwania with Ambassador Amair and the CEO of Egis, Laurent Germain. Then we will have a webinar with the Chambre de Commerce Franco-Arabe on the 28th of October on agro-industry in Egypt. And then I will open you the door for having Indian guests on February the 5th in Nice for our first forum, which will be dedicated to environmental and food security. You will meet there people and companies from the Maghreb, from the Middle East, and from the Gulf countries, and from Japan too, because Maurice maybe could say a few words about that India is a big interest for us, but Japan, and we have welcomed Dr. Matsura in our advisory board quite recently, and probably we will ask Ambassador Ashraf maybe one day or another. It was not a prepared question, but maybe we will ask some Indian personality to join the board of the Global Diwan. Maybe Maurice, if you want to add some words about my...
You said everything. So we are reaching out actually. So there is India, there is Japan. We have now a former Director General of UNESCO, Koichiro Matsura, who is member of an advisory board. We are thinking of having an outreach, and so events will take place. So India is part of our partners, I would say, major, and this webinar has shown that really there are plenty of opportunities. And I would like to thank again Ambassador Ashraf for being with us until the end of this exchange, because I know what the agenda of an ambassador is. And so thank you so much, Ambassador, for being with us until now. Thank you very much. Maybe you would like to have the last word, Ambassador.
No, I think it was an extremely illuminating discussion. And what is interesting is that each speaker added his own very unique perspective to the discussions, clearly made a very rich agenda today. And since we are speaking in the context of Global Diwan, I think the point that has been made about the Gulf countries also being a source of capital, very important. I have been at the heart of this transformation in the relationship from one which was essentially one first of energy, then of labor, then of market, to now of also a strategic partnership, which entails a lot of capital flows in areas that are pretty futuristic, both from the point of view of energy transition, but also in many other ways. One point that I should have mentioned, and it's going to be important, is the fact that India and European Union will soon start negotiations on 3 different agreements, one on investment, one on free trade, and one on geographical indicators. What is interesting is that compared to the negotiations that in a sense kind of drifted into nothing until 2013, the current offer that India has made to European Union is quite ambitious. And from my own experience, I can say that it is far more ambitious than whatever we have offered to earlier free trade agreements. It also takes into account offers on government procurement for the first time, labor and environment standards, agriculture, and a pretty impressive and ambitious list, including wine and spirit, 94% of manufactured goods. So in general, I think we can look to the future with some, because that will be an overarching framework in which we will also be dealing with India and France. So that's another very positive thing. And with Global Diwan, we look forward to working with you. With IFCI, we're going to launch the India Business Club here, which will be a big boost to connecting India and France. And I look forward to many more such interactions with you, Ambassador Montagne, with Eric Schell, and with Global Diwan. Thank you all for participating, for your excellent insights and perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.